All right, 3, 2, 1, let's get it. Do you consider yourself a go-to player? In my random reading this morning, I picked up John Maxwell's immense book. It's a big one, The Complete 101 Collection, What Every Leader Needs to Know. And I came across a chapter that really just jumped out there at me. Am I ready to step up my game? And to me, it couldn't have come at a better time because it's the start of a new year, and it's a moment for me to reflect on where I've been and a plan for where I want to go. And this chapter really got me to thinking about what it means to be a GTP, a go-to player, the kind of person that others count on when it really matters. And more importantly, how we can all embody those traits in our own lives. There is no fanfare for a go-to player. There is no formal announcement. There's nothing that you even put on a resume. You just become that guy, that go-to player. So let's talk about what makes a go-to player and how you can become one and why it's going to be a game changer for you, not just for your career, but also for every area of your life. So let's start with what is a go-to player. A go-to player is someone who just gets shit done. They get it done, man. No drama, no announcements. They just deliver, especially when the stakes are high. Maxwell says winning teams have players who make things happen. They have go-to players. And here's the thing. Being a go-to player, it's not about natural talent or some flashy education or resume. It's about just showing up, working hard, and building trust through consistent results. And here's where it gets interesting. Being a go-to player doesn't just make you valuable to your organization. It makes you indispensable to your team, your family, and even society at large. Go-to players create opportunities for themselves, and they become really what I like to call a free agent who can write their own ticket. And that's something we should all be striving for. I never want to get trapped playing another man's game. And so being a go-to player and establishing yourself as a go-to player, it's going to not only increase your collaborations with others, but it widens your connections, your independence, your resilience, your resolve, your confidence. Bro, it really is a form of a superpower. So let's break down what the traits of a go-to player are and how you can develop them. Because remember, you don't have to go to school for this. You don't have to download an app. You don't have to do anything other than identify with these traits I'm about to roll out to you, thanks to John Maxwell, and see, there may be a couple of these that you're pretty good at. And then there may be a few of them that you're like, yeah, I could really improve on that. Or maybe they're not existent at all, and it's just kind of an awareness. And hopefully just creates that spark where you just, dude, you strap in, strap up, strap on, success. So here's the first trait, according to John Maxwell, and I'll just riff off of that. Go-to players thrive under pressure. Love this one. They don't need ideal conditions or a perfect setup. Maxwell says they find a way to make things happen no matter what. You can see a person's true character when the stakes are high. You can. So when the stakes are high, when the pressure is on, do they panic or do they lock in, focus, and execute? The best go-to players rise to the occasion, and they don't complain. They don't make excuses. And frankly, the more pressure there is, the stronger they become. So you got to ask yourself, how well do you perform under pressure? Are you calm? Do you have a steady presence that people can count on? Or do you crumble when things get tough? And here's what's key. Number one, be honest with yourself. That's why confrontation is one of the life skills I coach on all the time. There's 5 of them: communication, curiosity, creativity, continuous learning and action, and productive confrontation. So confrontation, when you really get real with yourself and say, bro, look, when the heat has been on before, I crumbled. And part of the reason why you probably crumbled is because you kind of like a poster. You know, you walk behind the poster, there's nothing there. And sometimes we pose and we act like we have it going on, and we've developed a certain amount of skill sets to really hold our own, but then we kind of been masking the weaknesses, but then when the pressure's there and you get exposed, that's when you crumble. So part of the confrontation part of it is when you see this and you identify and you're like, bro, yeah, I've cut bait before and run, or I've started blaming, or I kind of set somebody else up. Maybe you've done those things. Maybe you pointed the flaws in somebody else just to get the heat off you. If that's the case, it's probably because you weren't well prepared and because you didn't voluntarily, continuous learning, the other life skill, because you didn't constantly learn and develop your skill sets without being mandated to do so. You really kind of became a paper champ. So just lock in. Say, okay, I got to get better prepared. And you do this, man, look, this is going to be a lifestyle. This isn't something that's going to be an event for this year, for the next 6 months. It's not an event. No, this is something that you just become, you embody it. All right? Second one, go-to players produce when resources are few. This one's super personal for me because I've never had a lot of natural talent or advantages. I was always really kind of the underdog. I was the last one to be picked on a team. I was deep on the depth chart when I got into college and played football. I came in the depth chart, but I left out on top because I've always had this unique ability. I became an All-American, All-Louisiana, and was also a permanent team captain, and that's voted by your teammates. That's more important than any sports writer's accolades of an All-American, whatever. I think that's kind of a political thing anyway, but I'm grateful for it. But really to be picked as a permanent team captain, and I was an offensive lineman. So, normally it's the Hollywood guys that get the permanent captain spot. That's the linebackers, the quarterbacks, the receivers, those kind of guys. And for my teammates to elect me as a team captain, as an offensive lineman, bro, that's like a lifetime achievement award for me. It was super special. Still is to this day. It means a lot. But I've always had this unique ability of being able to kind of stumble into positions and kind of just, shrink into the position, and then I just balloon out. Because what I've been able to do is I've been able to harness my curiosity and my creativity and really kind of play with a chip on my shoulder and then amass my skill set from there. Maxwell says that go-to players, they don't whine about what they lack. Instead, they see limitations as an opportunity to innovate. And this is why one of the 5 skills is the curiosity and the creativity side of it. Asking questions, the curiosity side. Asking questions, experimenting, tinkering, instead of giving up. And then the creativity, using your lack as leverage. When you lack resources, you become resourceful, making the most of what's available, no matter how little it may be. And so this resourcefulness, it's key. And that's what go-to players encapsulate. They don't need ideal conditions. And they're able to make things go their way because they just adjust for the way. They work with whatever they got. All right, the third one, go-to players produce when momentum is low. So let's talk about momentum. And John Maxwell, I think, breaks it down brilliantly. There's 3 kind of momentum carriers in organizations. There's momentum breakers, momentum takers, and momentum makers. So the first one, momentum breakers. these people just really sabotage the success of a team. They disrupt the culture. They throw a little shade around, and they break the momentum. And it becomes this incestuous cancer, and it just all kind of feeds upon itself. And before you know it, it just spirals out of control if you're not careful as a leader and nip that, cauterize it, and it just the thing can become a feeding frenzy. So that's momentum breakers. Momentum takers, they're neither nor. They don't disrupt the momentum, but they don't create it either. They just ride the wave. Whatever it is, they sink to the level of the organization, or they just rise to the level. They just go with the flow. And then there's momentum makers. This is what you want to be. This is the go-to players, the GTPs, baby. So being that go-to player, this is where you create the energy when your team is fatigued and, it looks like all hope is lost. Momentum makers, they just roll it up, man. They just work a process. They get in there. They make it happen. They don't talk a lot. And they just produce. And this is what you want to do. This is what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to pick up the slack and move things forward when the whole rest of the team is it's a little bit out of rhythm. You know how sometimes just things just aren't quite clicking. You feel like just the team's a little bit out of sync. This is where those momentum makers as a go-to player can really kind of glue this thing back together. And a lot of times, and this is what's special too, momentum makers, because they don't ride with the flow and they're only looking at an upward flow, they manage the downside. They don't cave to it, but they manage it and they lessen it, and then they just keep working for position and momentum because nothing stays the same. Momentum doesn't stay going, but it doesn't stay recessing either. So it's just a matter of managing these flows, but continue to work your process to make things go once again. And this is huge, man, for teams and organizations. So if you want to be a person of influence, this is going to be a key area, becoming a momentum maker. Number 4, go-to players produce when the load is heavy. Bro, this is where legends are made. Go-to players shine when the load is heavy. They do. And so when everybody else is kind of losing their head and everybody else kind of steps back, go-to players step forward. And they feel the heat. They're probably internally a little bit scared, but they step up. And they got big shoulders. And they have a willingness and a capacity to handle the heavy loads. And this trait is what builds the influence and trust. You can't just be influential. You can't just be trustworthy. You got to earn it. And so when the pressure's on, people remember the ones who showed up and who got the job done. These are those stories that get told later, in the moments when it all seemed lost and somebody just stepped forward out of the fog. It's where legends are made. It's where reputations are built. So if you want to become that person of influence, you got to embrace the hard moments. Confrontation's key. Don't shy away from them. And the last one, let's wind this thing up. Go-to players produce when the leader is absent. See, go-to players, they're not trying to undermine the leader. They're not even trying to get the leader's position. They don't even give a shit about that. They're just interested in producing results. So when the leader is there, they're a great companion to the leader. But when the leader is absent, go-to players have this knack, this ability to be able to just kind of step in that gap, fill the void. And they just keep things going, and they lead by example. And so they just, again, they rise to the occasion when needed, but then when they're not needed and the leader's back in the store, then they just continue to produce. They just steady eddies, man. They just go at it. And so I can tell you this, as a leader, man, it's incredibly valuable to have some go-to players on your team, and there's plenty of room for them. Because, again, go-to players don't need any special favors. They don't need big pats on the back. They just raw dog it, man. They just white knuckle it and get in there and make it happen. And so it's really, really a blessing if you can have a couple of go-to players on your team as a leader, so when you're out of the store or you're off or you're on vacation, that you have the assurances that the torch is going to continue to burn. And when you step back in, that thing's still red hot. And so you're not trying to recreate the momentum. It takes weeks to get that thing going again. And then boss man's looking at you because you're like, bro, you can't even leave. And the whole store went down the shitter when you weren't here. And I think, to me, this is the mark of a good leader too, is when you can create, and this isn't even in the book, but as I'm talking this out, when you can create go-to players. I think that's essential for a leader too. And the only way you're going to create go-to players is let them get to it. You got to have some trust built in there. You got to give them some leeway. You got to give them some runway. Stop micromanaging. Stop worrying. If you're worried about your position, then you've stopped learning and growing anyway, so you should be worried. But the confident leaders, I want to empower a go-to player. Do what I do. Take my spot, because if you take my spot, then I can go up to another spot, right? And so that's what's important too. If you are a leader, you need to be cultivating some go-to players. So that way, this will actually free you up. You may slow down a little bit to teach them, to empower them, and to guide them. But in the long run, and this is a long, infinite game we're playing, in the long run, you're going to slingshot up and forward, and you're going to bring other people up with you as well. So that's a whole side note there. So let me ask you this. Are you a go-to player? Do you consider yourself a go-to player? How do you measure up? And just think about the 5 traits. Do you produce under pressure? Do you thrive with limited resources? Do you create momentum when it's lacking? Do you carry the load when it's heavy? Do you deliver the results even when the leader is absent? So take a look at the list and identify, where are you excelling and where do you need to improve? Because being a go-to player is not about perfection at all. It's about consistency. It's about showing up. It's about working hard. And it's about being someone others can count on. Now, if you've grown complacent, maybe you've been a go-to player and your jersey got a little tarnished, kind of like butter left out on the counter too long, starting to soften up a little bit. What's cool is it's muscle memory, man. You know what it takes, all right? You probably felt a little sorry for yourself. You probably wanted a little more accolades. Maybe you got passed over for a promotion, whatever. But see, this is what's important as a go-to player, and what's key. It's a superpower, man, that no one can ever take from you. It's really an education in the experiences and the consistency and just developing an ethos that can carry into all areas of your life. So professionally, personally, creatively, you just become that go-to player. And I can tell you this. You become that go-to player, you're going to be less aggravated. You're probably going to not sabotage yourself with destructive vices and measures. You know, sometimes when we get to feeling down for ourselves, we kind of go into sabotage mode. We kind of tear ourselves down mentally, sometimes physically too. We just don't have that hum we once had. Okay, it happens. And so identifying these things and saying, hey, I've been a go-to player in this area. I need to harden this up, firm this up a little bit. And then there are some other areas maybe you've, historically just haven't been that at all. But what's great is it's just 5. So you just look at these 5 areas, and maybe you're about a 50% on all of them. So what can you do to start moving the needle? And so it's really just kind of staying in the clutch a little bit longer. It's being consistent. It's don't be disruptive. Stop saying stupid shit and just be someone that others can count on. And when I say others, I'm not just talking about organizations. I'm talking about your loved ones. I'm talking about society, but also be the kind of person that you can count on. And so when you start staying in the gap and you handle these loads and you create the momentum and you're not being disruptive and you're resourceful when there is no resources and you're not bitching and complaining about those things, and you just have this steely resolve and you're not giving a whole bunch of narrative to it, you're just locked in, I'm telling you, you're going to be less frustrated, way more productive. You're going to be a free agent in the market, and you can write your own ticket to success. And whatever comes, it comes. You just make a way for it. All right? I hope this episode helped you, and I hope it helps you become a go-to player. If there's anything I can do to help you, I'm on all the socials. You can DM me, and I'll be glad to get back to you. Or you can go to my website, marshbuice.com, and there in the bottom right, it's a mic from you to me. Leave me a personalized message. I think also on the podcast app, there's a link where you can send me a text message. Shoot me a text, man. And for those of you who just absolutely love What's Your Problem, the podcast, we are the top 3% podcast in the world. Please leave a rating and review. I know you're super busy, but we hadn't had a rating and review in a few pecan seasons. Man, thumb that rating, but more importantly, leave a review behind. What episode really stood out for you, and what was the thing that really kind of turned the corner? I was talking to a friend the other day, and she was talking about an episode that really stood out for her, and every time I see her, she repeats that episode to me and how it's keeping her on track. That's what this is all about, man. It's not about me. I just deliver the message that I've been given, and hopefully it helps you, because it certainly helps me, because as I share these things, I have a need to, it's kind of that I raise the bar, and so I reach up for that bar, and this gives me something to play to today. So enough about that. Leave a rating and review behind, because there are millions of podcasts out there, and it's your words that could stop someone in their tracks and say, let me check this out, man. Who's this bald-headed dude on the cover of the the podcast? What's your problem? There's 3 problems we all face: adversity, uncertainty, and complacency. And we'll give you some skills to be able to handle those things, which is communication, curiosity, creativity, continuous learning and action, and productive confrontation. I say give you those skills. You already have them. They're innate. You just have to make those things come alive a little bit. So hopefully listening to these messages, they kind of trigger those things. You're like, okay, got to get creative, got to be curious, got to be a continuous learner, got to communicate better, not only with myself and others. And then I got to confront, man. I got to confront some shit in my own life, but also confront in a productive way, not tearing people down or chasing people down or hunting people down. It's not about that. It's the confrontation, what you will allow, establishing some boundaries, and also establishing a flight path where you need to be, because you got somewhere higher to be. It ain't just here. All right, let's get out of here. Keep it simple. Keep it moving. Never settle. Stay tough. Peace.